This is the podcast helping to create, provide, and expand
winners in life.
Positively life-changing experiences through music for all.
Go for it!
This is the podcast that encourages everyone to
break ranks.
The 2024 Bands of America Championship season is underway, and this Break Ranks has great advice for students and directors headed to their first regional.
I remember back to my first time as a director going and taking my ensembles to a regional, and I was very nervous.
From Bands of America staffer Patrick Mainieri.
It can be very relieving to know this is what the venue looks like. This is where we're going to park. This is where we're going to have warm-up.
Who reveals how to strike the right emotional balance for the best performance.
The students will, no matter what, be paying attention to the stress levels of the adults.
And yes, this is a competition, but above all,
this is an experience.
This show will be an experience as well. It's time to break ranks. The first regional championship of the 2024 BOA season was this past Saturday at Toledo, Ohio's famed Glass Bowl. Here's BOA announcer Brad Bell.
And in first place, with a score of 77.3, the 2024 Bands of America Northwest Ohio Regional Champion, the Homestead High School Marching Band from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
The Homestead Spartans, always a Hoosier State powerhouse, are our first regional champions of the new season, just squeaking by Jenison High School of Michigan by a mere 1/10 of a point in finals. Jenison took high music and general effect honors in finals, with Homestead capturing the visual caption. Michigan's Rockford High School came in third in finals in Toledo. In prelims, Archbishop Alter High School of Ohio was the Class A champ. Jenison captured the 2A medal, Homestead the 3A champ, and Carroll High School of Indiana is the 4A winner at Toledo. This is going to be a fun break ranks packed full of very useful information for directors taking their band perhaps for the first time to a Bands of America regional this fall, or students participating in their first regional. And it's really all about how to control the chaos and how to calm the nerves and make it a fun experience for everybody. And I can't think of a better guy to talk about having fun at a BOA regional than Patrick Mainieri. Patrick is the Director of Participant Experience for the Bands of America Summer Camp presented by Yamaha, and he is also a constant presence as event staff at BOA Regionals and Super Regionals. Patrick Mainieri, for the first time, welcome to Break Ranks. Good to talk to you again, my friend.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's great to be with you today.
Do you hear from directors and students a lot about being nervous when they go to a BOA Regional or Super Regional?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at a lot of fall events over the past couple of years, and there's also just the sense of you can visibly see it on their faces and just how they approach. And I'm glad we're talking about this because I think there's some really good techniques that we can use as a past band director, taking my own ensembles to Bands of America regionals and super regionals and Grand Nats as well. I think there's some tips and tricks that can go a long way to ease everybody's spirits as they arrive at the site.
I'm not sure the best way to tackle this, but I think from a broad view, kind of start zoomed out, looking at this group of a couple hundred teenage performers, all of their instructors, all of their parent support staff, moving to a venue for a competition. That's hurdle number one. That's kind of big picture. And how do you control the chaos there? What advice do you give directors and parents?
Probably my biggest piece of advice is that Bands of America puts out incredible information in their what we call pre-communication emails that could go to student leadership teams. It could go to booster leadership. And also, the more that the staff is aware of what's in those pre-communication packets, it allows for everybody to just be on the same page. And so students can go to a staff member or a booster, and it doesn't have to go straight up to a director. That's something that we put into strategies, and it really helped just allowed people be on the same page with everything because the details are immaculate for what BOA puts out ahead of time for the events.
I am so glad you said that about the details being immaculate, because one of the first things, and I've been around BOA now for going on 30 years, one of the first things I remember noticing, and it's consistent to today, is every second of a contest day is accounted for in these big, thick binders that BOA has. Everybody has a responsibility. They know where they're supposed to be. That's what's going on internally at BOA. And that's what Bands of America tries to impart to the directors, too. That kind of detailed description of what the day is going to involve, where you're going to be when. That does calm some nerves, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think I remember back to my first time as a director going and taking my ensembles to a regional, and I was very nervous. I was a student participant when I was a drum major back when I was a kid, but I just got on the bus and went where the bus took me, and then we performed at the venue that we showed up at. But being a director and supporting a booster club and having student leaders that are interested in knowing how the process works, it's actually very developmental. And I think it can be very relieving to know this is what the venue looks like. This is where we're going to park. This is where we're going to have warm up. If we have a picnic, this is where the picnic will be. Again, BOA is just so incredibly intentional about providing as much information up front, because at a BOA site, we could have thousands of students. And at Grand Nats, we have hundreds of bands that are participating. And so the more information that they can put out in advance, the less stress it is for even the BOA staff and the Music for All staff that are on site to answer less questions and to just go with what has been planned for.
That's the information that you get beforehand. So that helps prepare. When the buses roll into the parking lot, what can a director expect?
Immediately upon arrival, they will be met with a parking staff member that is hired by Bands of America to make sure that the parking is done appropriately and safely. Safety is a top concern at all BOA events, to make sure that as students are walking through parking lots and staffs are moving around props, that everybody's aware. So the second you pull in, you're automatically met, and parking lot attendants take you to your parking area. They get you staged in your parking spots. They might have some directions to give you as far as if this is an unloading zone and we need to move the buses somewhere else, or the buses are going to stay right here. That is all dependent upon the venue and what space we have in allotment. And then at that point, directors are usually hopping off the bus and they're heading over to director check-in. And that's where they're being met with a smile from somebody from the participant relations office is there to welcome them and take them through that registration space.
Yeah, let's talk about that director check-in in a second, but I wanted to double back to safety, because I think it's good for us to mention that whether it's that person in the parking lot directing the buses, or you, a full-time staff member at Music for All, or me, an announcer, we've all had our background checks done so that we are qualified to be around the youngsters who participate in that. I think that's worth mentioning, right?
I agree completely. In my day-to-day work, I work for a child-facing and services organization, and we are all very, very intentional about making sure that every adult around anybody that has been hired by Bands of America to be on these sites, they all have background checks taken care of. And that's for safety reasons. And that happens in all Music for All and Bands of America hosted events across festival, fall, summer symposium, Rose Parade. Every single person is checked to make sure that everybody has a clean record to be working with youth and supporting youth in these scholastic areas.
Okay. Let's go back to check-in. There's something that is competitively significant that happens at check-in, and it's called the draw. What is that?
Yeah, so the draw is a very, very iconic piece of the Bands of America experience. And it's interesting because some directors won't touch the draw. They have a staff member do it, or they'll bring a drum major to do it, or they'll even ask just somebody walking by to reach their hand in and pull out. Other directors are hungry for the draw and they're excited to draw for their ensemble. It just kind of depends on the mood and kind of their traditions around their events experiences with Bands of America.
Yeah, what does it determine?
So that draw is a pre-seed. What that does is it allows us to move more quickly in the evening of the order of the finalist bands. So what you're doing is if you draw early draw, that means that you're going to be early in the map of the draw order. And so you're trying to get good numbers, trying to get that later number in your draw. You know, sometimes you reach in and you pull out a late number. It's just part of the tradition of Bands of America events, but it's a really fun part of it as well.
What is warm-up like and how long is it?
You know, warm-up, it's slotted depending on travel times and all of those things. And Dan, I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me as far as the actual time, but that is all pre-communicated with the ensembles. But essentially, when you move to warm-up, generally 2 ensembles are in warm-up rotations at a time. There are, again, Bands of America staff is there to take you through the whole process. They're going to give you warnings of how much time you have left. Directors can ask for additional warnings from the volunteers. You might want a 15-minute warning and then a 10-minute warning and a 5-minute warning. You might just want the 5-minute warning. But it is definitely a space and a place for you and your ensemble to get your visual warm up in. So that's body warm up, stretching, moving your body, just getting the kids kind of locked in on their awareness of movement. And then you move over to a music warm up, depending on the venue. Sometimes those are combined. Sometimes those are separated. Sometimes those are outdoors. Sometimes they're indoors. So it just really depends on the venue that you're at. But again, that's all pushed out in the pre-communications that are pushed out to all the directors. And again, it's very detailed of when you should arrive at warm up. It's very important that you arrive at warm up on time because once your time starts, you're on the clock as far as warm up goes. But I will say in this piece of talking about just the arrival and warm up, in the event you're delayed, you might have a bus that, blows a tire. You might have an equipment truck that's delayed. The most important thing is to reach out to the participant experience staff and call the hotline. Get a hold of somebody that will help you through that process with your contest director and your participant relations director that are on site, because adjustments can be made within reason. And the Bands of America staff is constantly working to make sure everybody's taken care of, even with those unintended delays that we might run into with transportation.
Let's talk about something a little more abstract. And I want to pull on your background as a former director and as somebody who's been at the entrance gate or in the tunnel as hundreds of bands have been preparing to come out on the field. And me as a former instructor way back, I know that I sent bands out onto the field that were overhyped.
Oh, yeah.
They were just way too enthusiastic and they kind of forgot their training and it wasn't a good show. On the other hand, you don't want a band that goes out there that doesn't realize that they have to have some level of energy to communicate with the crowd and with the judges. So have you seen bands that you knew like in the tunnel? Oh, no, they're way overhyped. They're just chomping at the bit. Cross my fingers. And what advice do you give directors about kind of finding that balance?
Yeah, there's definitely a balance. And what I would say is that, every band is a fingerprint in my mind. Every band has its own climate and culture about it. And how that director and that staff approach the preparation of their students and the mindfulness aspect of it is really what you're talking about in my mind is like, it's unique to the students of that ensemble and the leadership of that ensemble as far as the staff goes. And so what I always like to try to do is to strike a chord and find a balance, right? The students will, no matter what, be paying attention to the stress levels of the adults. That's just what students do at all times. We see that everywhere, public education. We see that at sporting events. Children are always looking towards older adults to see kind of like what is the decorum in this space. And so I always try to advise directors to be overly prepared mentally so that they can be cool, but not so cool that they're not excited about the experience. This is an experience. I understand that ensembles are, fundraising and they're planning. Some ensembles have to take 2 years to plan to travel to a BOA event. And so the excitement around that and all of the effort that's put in, finding a nice middle ground that works for your ensemble and having your student leaders talking openly to your student leaders about kind of what vibe do they want and how do they want to head into it. I will say over the years that I have been at the gate, as the more regular attendees come through, they have kind of what I call a chill excitement about them, if that makes sense, Dan. So they have like a passion and a fire burning inside of their body to go out and perform, but they have their mind on ice is the way I like to say it. So again, that's like the energy's inside the body and the mind is calm and ready to go execute on what that energy is and what they're prepared to do.
What is the number one thing you think directors forget at a regional or don't count on?
To be very honest, I'm going to say rereading some of the important event site-specific things. Some bands travel to multiple venues, whether that's within the same season or year over year. And each venue has its own uniquenesses to it. And so just reading the specific venue information, I think, is paramount in the experience, and it lessens frustration. And then, just being prepared and not feeling rushed as a director, have your go bag ready to go the day before with all of your supplies in it, kind of have your checklists prepared on the back end so that you're not scrambling while the buses are, getting the attendance taken care of and you're trying to get on the road. But really, it's just feeling prepared and being prepared is probably the number one thing that I can advise directors as they head towards a Bands of America experience.
I got to tell you, where I sit in the announcer's booth at these stadiums is so far removed from the performers and from that experience you get to have when you bring a band on the field. I'm a little bit jealous, Patrick, of you
It's
and
awesome.
James Stevens and all of the event managers. It has to be just one of the coolest things.
It is. Without a shadow of a doubt, I am blessed and I'm very grateful to be on the field team, to have the opportunity to welcome an ensemble, to interact with drum majors. You know, I'm the guy that's always trying to crack a joke. So, you know, I'll walk by a tuba player and be like, hey, how long you been playing clarinet? And just, they'll look at me like I'm just crazy sometimes. And I'm okay with that because I said, I'm just joking. You ready to have a great performance? And it's really just a nice experience to be down there in that space because they're ready at that point. I mean, they're hungry to go perform. The crowd is very excited to see the next ensemble as they're cheering off the ensemble that's wrapping up and we're loading students into the field. That energy is electric, and you really can't put your pin on anywhere else that exists in the Bands of America experience. Something about standing in the end zone and waiting to hear your voice or any of our amazing announcers' voices come over that PA system. It's electric.
Well, if you are lucky enough to be going next summer to the Bands of America Summer Camp presented by Yamaha, look for the guy in the stupidly large Music for All ball cap. That would be Patrick Mainieri. Go up to him and say, "Hi, Patrick. I heard you on Break Ranks. Thanks for the great advice." I think is really good advice, Patrick. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Dan. And I can't wait to see everybody on the field this year and at summer camp next summer.
Bands of America's Patrick Mainieri, Director of Participant Experience for the Bands of America Summer Camp presented by Yamaha, a former band director and part of the BOA field operations staff for the 2024 BOA marching band season. There are BOA regionals this weekend in Las Cruces, New Mexico, McAllen, Texas, in the Fortress at Obetz, Ohio, and I'll be your announcer for the BOA regional in Round Rock, Texas. Whatever happens, we'll be here to recap it all on next week's show. Until then, I'm Dan Potter. Go for it. Break ranks.